quote I really like about listening comes from the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, who says this: listen with the intent to understand, not to reply. The first step to empathic conversation is not in the questions we ask or the responses we give, but how we listen. One of the important things to understand today is that there are different levels of listening. Just because we're hearing doesn't necessarily mean we're listening. It can be helpful to see listening happening on a broad spectrum. And today we're going to divide it into 4 general levels of listening. Each level requires a different amount of effort and presence, and is likely going to apply in a different situation. So let's go through all of them together. The first level is pretend listening, which is quite a patronizing form of listening. Ever had anyone nod and go while looking at their phone or having their eyes somewhere else? Can you remember how you felt? Not great, I can imagine. In pretend listening, we appear to be listening, but we're mostly just waiting until it's our turn to respond, to share what we think about the situation or ask a question we already have. The problem here is that there's a lack of attunement to the other person, which can cause them to withdraw from the interaction. You can think of attunement like listening to the radio. You have to tune in to the right frequency to find the radio station you're looking for. In the same way, attunement means tuning into the other person's frequency, using your actions, your speech, the way you listen, to try and hear and understand what they are trying to convey to you. The second level is selective listening. Ever had anyone reply to something that you said with something completely off topic or barely even related to what you said? It can feel completely non-attuning and rude, right? When we listen selectively, we're picking out the information that we want based on what we want to hear, rather than actually trying to catch what the other person wants us to understand. Once again, there's a lack of attunement. And this, unfortunately, tends to result in more miscommunication and more misunderstanding. So selective listening might be helpful when we're doing something that doesn't require much attention to each other, like ordering a coffee or your food at the hawker center, but not so much when someone is sharing something deeply personal with you. And that's where the next few levels come in. The third level is attentive listening. Now, this is where we're taking in the content of what the other person is saying. We're focused on them, we don't interrupt, we hear what they say, and we engage with follow-up questions and clarification. That sounds great, right? It is. Well, there is a catch though. In attentive listening, we're still trying to relate to what the other person is saying based on our own experience or frame of reference, instead of a position of empathy. It's great, but it can result in us struggling to understand what they're trying to share, especially if it's outside the realm of our own experience. And I guess that's where the fourth level comes in, deep listening. And that's when we listen with the sole purpose of making the other person feel heard and accepted. It's not something that we can do all the time, but it's what this module is all about. Psychologist Carl Rogers believed that deep listening is at the heart of all healthy relationships. You see, when we're listening with empathy, when we allow ourselves to connect with the other person and their emotions, we are listening to not just what is said, but also what is unsaid. We may not have gone through the same experience, but the sole purpose in deep listening is to try and see things the way they see them, understand their point of view, and to help them feel heard and accepted. Let's be honest though, deep listening may not come naturally or easily to us. This is a skill that can be learned, just like any other skill. It's the foundation for peer support and empathy. Because when we really feel heard and listened to, it gives us a sense of connectedness and belonging. It reduces our isolation, it allows people to heal, and also reconcile their own struggles with themselves. Deep listening is the most helpful when supporting people through difficult emotions. But it also takes the most mental and emotional effort. So you might find that you have varying capacity for this on different days. You may not be able to do it all the time. So for example, if I'm in the midst of moving house, which is by far one of the most stressful experiences in adult life, I'm not likely to have the capacity to deep listen with a friend in between moving furniture. So this variation in capacity, even throughout the course of your day, is really normal. What we do need to do is be more aware of it so that we can create the capacity for it, or we can draw boundaries around when we can deep listen. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But for now, let's just take a pause and a moment to reflect. Remember the examples of Alex and Leslie? They were talking to their friends. Now think about the levels of listening we talked about. Which level of listening do you think Alex and Leslie engaged in? They were short interactions, and we don't really know their regular friendship dynamic, so it can be tough to pinpoint. But I'd say they were at best attentively listening to their friends, or at worst, completely ignoring what they said. Next, think about yourself. Which of the 4 listening types do you think that you tend towards? Pretend listening, selective, attentive, or deep listening? You can jot this down in your notes as well. While you do that, just remind yourself, these moments of honest reflection, they're not meant to be a criticism and judgment. What they do offer us is a chance to build awareness. Whatever level you find yourself tending towards, that's okay. If you find you're being harsh to yourself, show yourself some self-compassion, just like how we learned in the previous modules. We're just here to learn what our other options are. Now lastly, see if you can imagine right now someone who is truly listening to you. Bring it into your mind's eye, and can you describe 3 things about their body language? What are they doing that lets you know that they're listening to you? And that's great, because nonverbal communication, that's the first set of skills we're going to talk about next.